The first two things we want to do begin on page 2 of your handout. And we want to just share with you some of the goals and the assumptions behind the project before we do a first pause for you to think. Now, goals are important because they fundamentally answer the question why. And I'll bet you 20, 30, 50 times people are going to ask you, why are we doing this? Why can't we just be doing what we've been doing for a long time? So these goals are a way of responding to that. I'll take the first 4 goals as a place to start. The first answer to that why is to enhance the vibrancy of parish life in the Diocese of Saginaw. You already have a lot of vibrant parishes. How can that grow? How does parish life thrive, not just survive, in the midst of the challenges of employment and unemployment, changing demographics, people's own transitions? So vibrant parish life, and we'll later share with you at the current state 16 proposed criteria to evaluate that. Secondly, to strengthen the presence and the ministry of the church in the urban and the rural areas of the diocese. So how to strengthen the presence of the church wherever it is. The Archdiocese of Seattle that I worked in for so long, 25,000 square miles, 179 parishes, from the ocean to the Cascade Mountains, from Canada to the Oregon border. Some very big cities, Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, and so on. Some really rural hamlets. I know parishes are very different in different parts of a diocese. So we want to offer in this process an opportunity uniquely, respectfully, to look at each parish on its own terms and ultimately to strengthen the presence and the ministry of the church. Third, to foster an appreciation for and greater participation in the Sunday Eucharist. Maureen and I have been working recently in the Diocese of Scranton in Pennsylvania on a project like this. They're a few years down the road from where you are right now. And one of the priests, a great guy named Bob Simon, said, you know, every time I celebrate Eucharist, I try to bring my best self and my best spirit and my best energy to that celebration of Eucharist. But I gotta say, when I process into a church and it's a third full or 20% full, it's very, very different than when the church is 80% full or 90% full. It's the singing, my preaching is better, the interaction, the spirit is even more present. So how does Sunday Eucharist become even more meaningful for the people of this diocese? And the fourth area, one that the bishop's already spoken about, to promote new evangelization efforts so that vibrant parish life leads directly to new evangelization. Maureen?
And the fifth goal of the project is to realign parishes within the diocese, considering the number of priests available to serve, financial resources, and demographics. All those have changed in the last 70 years. So how can we realign parishes so that they are vibrant? We know it's going to take some restructuring of them. The sixth goal is to ensure that parishioners have opportunities for quality, lifelong religious education, so that maybe 3 little parishes can't have a professional DRE, but if they merged or linked or were in big partnership, they could afford to hire somebody that could really help with quality, lifelong catechesis. The seventh one is to strengthen those who are marginalized. And that depends upon where you are in the diocese. In my parish, and it's an outlying suburban parish in Milwaukee, in Waukesha County, our newest ministry is to help those who are unemployed or underemployed. It's a very serious ministry because of the employment issue. And I'm sure that ours is probably less than yours. So when you say marginalized, you're not always talking about people in low income or people who are seriously deprived of some of life's better circumstances. We're really talking about what it is in your parish that marginalizes people and how can we support them, especially during times of need. And the eighth one is to promote vocations both to the ordained ministry and to lay ministry.
There's just 4 more in this listing. Again, we're going to ask for your critique. If you find some of these words challenging, if there's a different goal you'd like to see, that's what we ask on the green forms later. But the 9th goal is to support new initiatives for youth and young adults. So here's a goal. A lot of the goals will show up later in the criteria. Somebody this morning said you don't have a specific criteria to evaluate what we're doing with youth and young adults. A very helpful comment to think about. Number 10 is to build a greater sense of unity among Catholics from all cultures. So whatever cultural group someone comes from, whatever language people speak, how can there be a better sense of we're all united around the one mission of the Diocese of Saginaw? Number 11, to increase collaboration among all entities in the diocese. One way that's going to happen is that after the parish phase, which will be basically between November and March, there'll be a cohort phase, we're calling it, where individual parishes will be talking with neighboring parishes, and you'll give input into who those conversation partners should be. We'll show you the draft form later on today. And those conversations are about collaboration. Maureen gave one example. Maybe we can do religious ed better, or youth ministry better, or evangelization, or stewardship, or vocation efforts. And maybe we can train all of our parish pastoral councils together and not have 6 sessions but 1, and bring a group of people together. So collaboration, there'll be lots of examples of that moving forward. And the last one, very, very important in terms of advocating for peace and justice, the work of the church in building the reign of God. How can that be done more effectively through this process? So these goals are meant to answer that big question, why is this going on? And the answer is not just one of these, but it's a collection of them. There were 10 last week, 2 more were added even in the last couple of days. We look forward to hearing from your feedback. But we'd like to go one step further before we ask you to kind of pause at table, catch your breath, and talk about this. And that is, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the models and the 8 steps and all these kinds of things, we want to share with you some of the assumptions that are underneath this process. And really, to be fair, we should give credit. Both the Archdiocese of Milwaukee and Seattle had something to do with this. We've had a privilege as consultants to work in the last several years with the Archdiocese of Newark, the Archdiocese of Indianapolis, the Diocese of Madison, of Scranton, of Peoria, of St. Petersburg. Each diocese has their own story. Each one would say, now we're unique, don't try and treat us like someplace else. Well, that's certainly true for you as well. And that's one of the reasons why the meetings today are so important, for you to give your own best thinking to this process before it goes public. So we just want to share with you some assumptions. They begin on the bottom of page 3.
And you're going to notice throughout this process that there's a spirituality that underlies it all. And if you had to summarize it in 1 or 2 words, it would be the Paschal Mystery. There will be times in this process, on this journey toward the future, where there will be experience of a lot of loss or death of the way we used to do things. And then there will be experiences of ambiguity. Where are we going? Why are we doing this? What's it all about? And out of that will arise new and more vibrant parishes. It's sticking with the Paschal Mystery. We all have our hands up when it comes to being baptized, and we love the Easter experiences. But sometimes it's those Good Friday experiences that we run as far away from and think if we forget them, they're going to go away. This really looks at those. It looks at those strengths and struggles and sees it in terms of the Paschal Mystery, which really gives us a lot of energy. It gives us a lot of hope when we're feeling at our lowest. And there will be low points in terms of feelings during this process. The second one is, we know that some of you are already linked. There have been parishes that have closed, and some of you are in partnership with one another. We know that there are very competent and good pastoral administrators. So this is not all brand new. This is a way to look at the whole diocese and say, instead of doing things when needs arise, it's to plan for the future in an organized way with the models, most of which you've already experienced. The third one is to help people, and this is a real challenge because we've been steeped in parochialism. I grew up in Chicago, a suburb of Chicago, where our identity is people would say, where are you from? You wouldn't tell them your address. You'd say, I'm from Ascension Parish, or I'm from Incarnation, or I'm from St. Giles. It was that kind of a parochial identity that we were very proud of. It got us to where we are. There's nothing wrong with this, but in this process, we try and help people to see the bigger picture. What is church? How is our parish a part of church? How are we helping to build the reign of God? What are the big issues and the big presence of the Catholic Church in a certain area? And the fourth assumption that we come out of is very important, and that's commitment to the Eucharist, prayer, and spirituality. And they're just a very necessary part of the planning process. So in the materials that you'll get when we have the trainings, you're going to see prayer services based on Scripture, based on reflection on Scripture, and then based on sharing of faith that work very easily because they're structured. And you don't have to be a Scripture scholar to be able to respond to what word spoke to me today. So when we look at the assumptions, you gradually, as we go through this, you're going to see real practical examples built into the process.
So continuing on those, stewardship is another assumption behind this. And it's stewardship of you and other human resources. The bishop's already spoken a bit to that. How can your energies as pastoral administrators, as pastors, as priests be nourished? It's also of the financial resources and of the facility resources, the diocese. So people will be given data verification forms, and they'll be able to look at the sacramental life of a parish. How many baptisms, weddings, funerals over the last 5 years, and what's the trend, the finances, mass attendance, a number of other things. They'll be asked to look at the paid and the unpaid staff in the parish, who's involved. They'll be asked to look at the condition of their facilities as very important elements of this. So this assumption leads directly to some aspects in the program. The one's vision of church must be larger than one's own is a little bit what Maureen just said, larger than a geographic reality or an ethnic community. We do hear in lots of dioceses when they talk about the future of parishes, well, we shop over here, so we should organize parishes this way, or our school districts are organized this way. So we want to take attention to that, but again, call people to a larger vision of what's best for the whole diocese of Saginaw. Number 7 comes back to you in this room and the folks who are in the room this morning as well. Strong leadership matters. And not helpful leadership hurts. We have come across occasionally, you might be surprised to hear, some pastors who really not only resisted this process but tried to actively sabotage it. In one diocese, we call them red light pastors, and we want to bring 7 of them into the bishop. And I don't mean red light district, but I do mean, green light we would hope for, namely people who are willing to give this process a chance. Yellow light, that there's some concerns, but red light really wanting to say stop. I just want life to be the way it was, maybe until I reach retirement age or something. So leadership really makes a huge difference. We're going to come back to this later in the presentation when we talk about resistance to change and ways of addressing that allow for new life. So your leadership as pastoral administrators, as pastors, as priests, the leadership of deacons, people who will be on the core teams with you that we'll describe later, people who will be on a planning commission, and we'll outline that later, all of that makes a difference. The bishop by himself, as good a man as he is, can't make this process successful. All of you can. And our job is to help you, as Maureen said, be successful in the process. Just a few more.
And the 8th one has to do with planning, helps all parishes in the future, whether there's a crisis or not. In the Diocese of St. Petersburg, they did not have the dynamic of a diminishing number of priests because they have so many active senior priests that come down to retire. But they did diocesan-wide planning to really have sharing of resources and good stewardship of resources and increase the vibrancy of parishes. So planning's good whether there's issues of survival and sustainability or not. Parishes are also stronger and more effective if they work together. We're finished with the days when I'm going to have the perfect parish and I'm going to make sure everything's perfect in my parish. Those days are gone because you can't possibly do it. Plus, if you work together, 2 or 3 or 4 parishes can be stronger because they're not duplicating services or resources, but they're filling in the gaps where nothing may be happening in terms of one aspect of the mission. Okay, so working together is one of the assumptions that we have really tested and found that it builds up strong parishes. It takes a little bit more time, and initially it may take too much time. It gets streamlined the more you get to know people and the more the direction becomes clear. Number 10, when planning is done at the local level and there's meaningful involvement by those who will be affected by change, there's more ownership and less resistance. We would like to give gold stars out for every 100 people that are really involved in parish planning. The more people that are involved, and we're going to give you lots of ideas and help on how to do this, the more people that are involved, the more chance you have for vibrant parishes, vibrant merged parishes, or vibrant linked parishes. So this is one area where your leadership is key. And the second key is identifying the right people for people to work with you in a leadership role, so you don't have to do it by yourself.
And finally, 3 last assumptions. 11 and 12 both speak to merger possibilities. And this is not a process that is intended to have all the parishes merge in the diocese. It's to be one of 5 models that we'll outline more in detail later. But I want to say a couple things about these ones. If and when parish mergers are needed, they'll be less traumatic and more natural if people in parishes have already been in some relationship, and there may well be need to think about the facilities of those parishes before making a decision. And let me just stop here for a second, just make a comment about mergers. And you know as well as I do, this has been going on for a number of years in many different dioceses, and from my perspective, it's been done well sometimes and not so well other times. One reason when it's not done well is because a process creates winners and losers. And that's something that I would ask all of you to help work at so that we don't create winners and losers, but rather brothers and sisters in the Lord who are working together. Let me just give you one example. Let's say 4 parishes are talking about the possibility of merging together. Let's just call them A, B, C, and D. And let's say the new reality is going to be at site D. So one way it's been done in our country is that A, B, and C close. A, B, and C have closing liturgies. D tries not to gloat but feels, thank God we survived this. And then they try to invite the people from A, B, and C to join them. And oftentimes the experience is they don't want to come because they just felt they lost in the process. Why would I come to your place? And literally today as we speak, there are still people chaining themselves into pews in Boston because that sense of winners and losers was created. And I did some work recently in Boston and was really saddened to hear from this one pastor that what was 35% regular weekend attendance of Catholics at Mass is right now, by the latest count, 22%. And one of the reasons for that is that winner and loser dynamic. So we offer to you, suggest to you a different way of thinking about merger if that's appropriate for you. The way would be to say A, B, and C and D are going to merge together. When they merge together, let's say it's site D, it's going to be a whole new parish community with a new name and a new energy about it. And there are going to be closing liturgies in parish A, B, C, and D to honor the life and the ending of those communities as standalone communities. There's one parish I can think of in Scranton that did this. They had closing liturgies in all 4 parishes. They created banners with the parish's name and the beginning date and the ending date, 2010, of each of those 4 parishes. And they did lots of things with their statuary and other things. But in the opening liturgy of the new parish community called Divine Mercy, they had on the banner that led the procession the names of the other parishes and those beginning and ending dates, really trying to honor the past but move forward into a new reality. Now, I don't want to have really any rose color on my or our glasses. They have plenty of challenges. And actually the most interesting one is the pastor of the new community said, we did a lot better with the other communities. We didn't prepare our people as well to realize how much they were going to change, becoming part of a new community. So there's a lot of work to be done when we get to that, but mergers can happen with lots more life when there's lots more care given to them. Finally, in terms of the assumptions, before we give you a chance to chime in, as needed, we're not sure right now. You might be able to give us some feedback if resources need to be in Spanish as well as in English. In some dioceses, we've had them in Korean and Portuguese and Vietnamese. So let us know if you think there are language issues that would be barriers to people's participation in the process. We can address that as we move along. So we've been speaking with you for a while now. Let's kind of take a first pause and give you a chance, maybe for 7 or 8 minutes, just at tables, to say, what from what you've heard so far can you affirm, or what makes sense, and maybe what concerns or questions emerge for you, and then we'll take a few questions, okay? So I'll ring this little chime here and call you back in a few minutes, okay? So have a good time at tables saying hi and talking a little bit.